What is baseball? Is it just a game? Is it life? Or is it a crumb of insignificance tumbling off of a loaf of greater insignificance that is just our universe? We'll explore all those things. And if the Phillies are a really weird team this year, because they are. They're kind of weird, right? All those things and more, because that's what we do here on the Phillies Nation Podcast, Episode 5. Yo, Phillies Nation! Welcome to the Phillies Nation Podcast, Episode number 5. My name is Tim Malcolm, the editorial director of PhilliesNation.com. The Phillies are 9-9, huh? 9-9. We're sailing smooth on the good ship Phil right now. The podcast can be found on SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and YouTube at youtube.com/PhilliesNation. Go to PhilliesNation.com for all of your news, information, rumors, opinion, good stuff. Facebook.com/PhilliesNation. Twitter at PhilliesNation. You should follow us on Twitter. We're always having a lot of fun during the games. And Instagram at PhilliesNation _. Very important to put after the Phillies Nation part in Instagram. So yeah, the Phillies are 9-9, aren't they? How about that? That's pretty cool. It's great. And it was a good week. They started the week at a 5-8 mark. Or 4-8, that is. And then they beat the Mets 2 out of 3. And then they swept the Braves. Cool. So we'll talk about all of that today on the podcast. Real quick, our guest today is Gregg Murphy. Or Murph, as you may know him. He's the guy who is all over the place at Citizens Bank Park and visiting parks on your broadcast. Tom McCarthy and John Kruk and Ben Davis. Usually move it over to him. And he'll talk to us about being a field reporter and also growing up as a Phillies fan, as we always do in our interviews. And he's going to talk also about sort of that transition from field reporting to play-by-play. He's done some play-by-play recently, and I thought he's actually done a really nice job, especially this spring. He did a really good job. And we talked about that a little bit and how underrated Tom McCarthy is. And I honestly believe that Tom McCarthy is a very underrated broadcaster. He does a really good job out there. It's a very hard job, and he does a good job of it. So the Phils are 9-9, and you know, what are they doing? Are they good? Are they bad? Are they weird? That's kind of what I'm thinking about right now. I don't know. I think they're somewhere in the middle, maybe worse than we think, because we were all talking after Sunday's game. They hit the 3 consecutive home runs, and that was really great. But everybody was talking about how their run differential is at 7 over right now. I think they've scored, 85 runs, and they've given up 78. So they have a +7. And we kind of need to remember that the Phillies did win a game 17-3 earlier this year. They did lose to the Mets by a pretty decent margin too, so it sort of washes out, but it sort of doesn't. They beat the Braves in a sweep, but they also were all one-run games, and they were very tight. Well, okay, Sunday wasn't a one-run game. It was actually tighter than you think. I mean, it was tight up until the 8th inning, and then the Phillies broke out with these 3 consecutive home runs, which doesn't happen often, and we can't discount that. It's a great thing that happened. But other than that, the Braves did score a run in the 9th. The Phillies still seem to have this weird problem with who the heck is pitching the 9th inning. Let's talk about that for a second. It's weird, right? It's really weird. And even LA and Fransky on the broadcast are talking about, here's Hector Neris, who's not the closer, but he's closing. And maybe he'll be the closer when we're told that he's the closer. It's really weird because earlier in the year, Jenmar Gomez was taken out of the closer's role in a very public way to the media, and then Pete Mackanin said, yeah, Joaquin Benoit is now our closer. Gomez is out, Benoit's in. And asked if Neris should be the guy. He said, well, we like Neris where he is right now. We want him to get big outs. We think for his development, it's best that he's in the 8th inning, or whatever he said there, sort of, I'm paraphrasing. But, by the way, Neris is like 27, 28. He's not necessarily 23 here. But we all thought, okay, Benoit's the veteran. He's been there before. We get it. Fine. If you're going to do a closer thing, good, that's fine. Do it. Benoit's the guy. Let him be the closer. And Neris gets to be the setup guy. But then Benoit, of course, blows the game against the Nationals. Bryce Harper hits a home run with 2 outs in the 9th inning. I mean, come on, Bryce Harper. It's not as if it was Paul Janisch, right? It was Bryce Harper. No offense to Paul Janisch, but come on. Then, the next time the Phillies have a safe situation, which is against the Mets, McCannon just puts Neris in the game in the 9th. And then he did it again. And then he did it again. And it's what is happening here? If McCannon wants to use Neris, why doesn't he just say... Because he said it with Gomez. He made it public with Gomez. If you're going to make it public with Gomez, you got to make it public with Neris. I mean, you just got to be consistent. That's just my bugaboo with this. He's got to be consistent. Otherwise, we're Ryan Sandberg all over again. And you don't want that. You want consistency here with the media. You want consistency with the players. I'm sure the players are probably getting the message. But we, as fans in the media, we just kind of need to know what the heck is going on here. Not to whine or anything, but come on, just be consistent with this message so we're not making narratives that are dumb about this. I mean, seriously. That said, if McCannon wants to go with this sort of Hector Neris is the guy for the moment because he has the best stuff, and then sort of if Neris has a rough patch, then he just decides that Pat Neshek is the guy, or maybe Benoit again or whatever, then that's fine. Do that. I don't mind that. I think that's great. I think having a set closer, sometimes can be a really dumb idea because not every team in baseball has that kind of guy. Unless you have Mariano Rivera or Trevor Hoffman or Papelbon in his prime or whatever, it's really hard to have a guy who just say, you're the 9th inning guy, go. Most of the time that doesn't work. For the Phillies, especially the Phillies, who are not a playoff team right now, at least at this moment, they don't need to do that. They can have guys who kind of cycle in and out of the 8th and 9th inning and whatever else. They have good enough relievers to be able to do that. So right now, I think McCannon should just go with his gut. But if you're going to do that, say that. I don't need to talk about the closer thing every time. I just want to go with my gut right now and see whoever the best guy is for the job is going to be that guy. End of story. Done. Move on. We don't need to talk about closers anymore. Just do that and move on. That's it. Meanwhile, the Phillies are weird. They have great defensive moments, and we'll talk to Dan Walsh in a moment about the defense. And then they also have ridiculous hiccups. And we talked a little bit, Dan and I, about Tommy Joseph, who looks like he's really lost, and I think he needs a couple days. I think we need to get Brock Stassi in there. Maybe Daniel Nava moves to first base for a game or two. Maybe when Kendrick comes back from the DL, he moves to first base for a game or two. Also, Aaron Altair needs to play every day. I mean, that's just... What we're seeing right now with Aaron Altair is the guy needs to play every single day. He's hitting .364 with a .667 slugging percentage, 36 plate appearances, but he looks really, really solid out there and knows what he's doing, and his defense is good. He should be playing in the outfield every day, it seems like at this point. He's got to get his chance. Otherwise... They're weird, right? They get in these very close games. If they can hold it for a while, maybe they find a way to get a run home and they get a lead, and maybe the bullpen does the job. If not, then we get all upset about it. But that's what 500 teams and teams that are around 500 seem to do all the time. The manager's role is a little bit more elevated. We get to see in real time how the manager makes mistakes and how they apply to the game at hand. And so we get a little bit more ornery about McCannon and other managers of 500 teams at this kind of team. But that's what the team probably is. I think this team is somewhere going to be around a 500 team this year. Maybe a little bit under that. They don't look that great. Again, smoke and mirrors with the Braves wins. We'll see. They also sometimes look really good. And the starting pitching is finally coming along. Really good pitching performances this weekend. Zach Eflin looks like he belongs. Really does. Really looks like he belongs right now. He's got a 2.25 ERA, a 3.82 FIP, fielding independent percentage. He looks like he's just solid, and we need a guy like that right now. Velasquez, hopefully he continues to kind of get himself in a groove and get past that 5-inning thing. He goes up against the Marlins on Tuesday. Aaron Nola has a much better FIP than his ERA. I think he looks fine. Jeremy Hellickson looks great. Eichhoff looks great. So hopefully that continues. And if that does continue, this team probably has enough to be around 500 for quite a while. And that's cool. We want to see a 500 team going into June, July. It'd be really neat. We don't need to make any big moves at the deadline. We can even sell a little bit. But if this team can contend a little bit until the summer, that's going to be great for everybody. The young kids, the prospects, for the fans. It'll be great. So hopefully that continues. So far, so good. 9-9. Take 2 of 3 from the Marlins. Then do whatever the heck you can against the Dodgers and the Cubs. But hey, this is fun. This is good. We're now in a groove. 9-9 Phils. Let's go. Well, one great thing about the Phillies this season so far, at least to our eyes, is the defense. They've been making some great plays. There's certainly some great plays from Freddie Galvis. Odubel Herrera has had some really nice plays out there, taking better routes. Dan Walsh is here of Phillies Nation to talk a little bit about some of the defensive highs and lows for the Phillies this season. First off, Dan, I don't know. Do you think the Phillies look better defensively this year? I mean, take that last sort of half of the Braves game on Saturday out of the equation. But what do you think?
I actually was really worried about their defense coming into the season because, especially in the corner outfield spots, right? You think Michael Saunders, not really known for his defense, to say the least. Howie Kendrick is an infielder converted into playing left field just because, that's where there's been a spot for him in the last few years. So I was really concerned, especially about outfield defense this season. But, it hasn't been terrible. And I think that now with Kendrick out and hopefully Altair getting some more reps in left field, that the defense as a whole can start to come together, at least in, portions of the field.
Yeah, right now the outfield defense doesn't have any errors, and Altair has not played, at least played 61 innings, actually 70 as of today, and he's had only kind of a handful of chances out there, but he seems to be very fluid out there. Left field is obviously a much easier position than right field for a lot of players, although a lot of balls are hit the left field too, so I don't know. But Odubel Herrera, I think, has been really decent. Just watching him in 2015 and some of the routes he was taking the balls and sort of getting lost in the field there, he looks like he's much more polished at center field. Do you think?
Yeah, and I mean, we do have to give him some slack because before the Phillies picked him up, he had played something like 20 innings in the outfield. So the fact that he's even as good of a fielder as he is now is kind of astounding. I wouldn't say that he looks like a natural out there because I don't think he looks natural doing anything, like literally anything in his life. But I feel pretty confident in him at least, when the ball's hit in a gap or anywhere towards center. I feel confident that he'll at least end up in that area.
Yeah, I love, was it Friday, I think it was, a Braves player, I forget who it was, but hit one deep. And he made this ridiculous, he didn't have to make the sort of moves that he made when he got to the ball, but he made them, and then he tumbled, and he put on a show of it. And then Saturday he had the really nice catch where he didn't waste a step to the ball. It seems like you can get that beautiful, graceful play once in a blue moon from him, but yeah, he's usually pretty awkward. But hey, he's our guy. I love him.
Yeah, I'm in his corner. Trust me.
Now the infield has had all the errors so far this season, and really the biggest error. I mean, actually, let's say this: Maikel Franco has 3 errors so far this year. Is he a good fielder, or is he? I know we're going to talk later in the podcast about his hitting, but is he a good fielder or a bad fielder? I think we've kind of been on both sides of this. What are you thinking?
Right. I hesitate to use errors as a metric for actual defensive acumen.
Yep.
But so as for Franco himself, though, he seems to me like a player who will never have immaculate range, right? He'll never have Manny Machado's range over at third base, but he has a crazy good arm, and he seems to have decent hands, and that's true to even when I was reading before he came up, was that his range in the hot corner would be questionable, but if he can have if he can have good hands, if he can make the throws, then he should be at least passable defensively. And that seems to be the case so far, at least from what I've seen.
Yeah, I think with Franco, you're right. The range is really the biggest question mark, but I think he kind of has been able to mask that a little bit by positioning himself pretty well out there against hitters. It doesn't seem like he's put in a position where he has to make a crazy dive to the baseline or the foul line. It doesn't seem like he's really out of position to get a really, tough line drive over his head. For the most part, he's usually in the right place at the right time, and that has to be a testament to the coaching, I guess.
Yeah, and all the the statistics that they're keeping track of now and the computer models that they have to try to determine where the ball might be hit will certainly help fielders like Franco kind of hide that lack of range, going forward in the future.
Now, as far as, to me, it looks like the worst defensive player out there is Tommy Joseph. I could be wrong, but he seems like it seems like he makes this really bad mental mistakes, which I guess is not it's a fielding thing, but it's not a fielding thing. It's not an athletic thing, let's say. What do you think about Tommy Joseph? I think he's better than Ryan Howard for sure.
Yeah, well, I think I would be better than Ryan Howard also, but
I feel bad. We shouldn't be knocking him.
No, listen, I have plenty of respect for Ryan Howard also, but he had some pretty terrible moments there in the field. But no, so Tommy Joseph, it's hard to really assess anything about him right now because he seems so completely lost. He seems lost at the plate. He'll swing at 3 pitches, nowhere near the strike zone in a row. And then how often do you see a player who's slumping to that degree at the plate go out into the field and then make mental errors also in the field? So it's like maybe he's just so in his own head right now that every aspect of his game might be falling apart. For all we know, he's going to put a ball in play and run to third base instead of first. That's kind of how out of it he seems right now. And I really hope he turns it around soon.
Well, it's kind of funny because last year everybody forgot about him, and nobody in the system, it seemed like, even thought about Tommy Joseph as potential anything. And that's when he just broke out completely and became a major league, ready hitter. But now it seems like because everybody's waiting on him to do something big, a lot is happening and he's not really responding. I wonder if it is like he's totally in his own head and he can't get out because so much is expected of him right now.
Yeah, it's impossible for us to say from the outside, but that's something that would at least explain, the level of the struggles that he's had because he's really just up there hacking at this point.
Yeah, and throwing balls to third base, thinking that Freddie Galvis is a runner.
Yeah, he's trying to get Freddie Galvis out of third himself.
It's really tough to watch right now. I feel bad for the guy. Well, let me ask you this question then: if Tommy Joseph continues, at what point? So someone on Twitter today said something to the extent, and this is Sunday we're talking after Aaron Altair hit his home run. At what point do we think Howie Kendrick plays first base and Aaron Altair is in the outfield? Is that something that could happen soon?
It could happen. It seems like he should, Tommy Joseph should at least get the full month of the amount of playing time that he's been getting. Some guys start slow. It takes, how many dozens of at-bats before your stats actually normalize and become predictive of the future. It seems like if they were bullish enough on him to name him the opening day first baseman, at least give him that time. So that if it is just a slump, which players go through, it happens. He has time to at least climb back out of it before we decide that his entire career is a wash.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I worry that everything he's doing right now looks bad, and it looks like he just doesn't know how to play Major League Baseball. Finally, the best defensive player on the team, it seems like it's Freddie Galvis. I don't think that's a question at this point. Are you with me on that one?
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that, to the point where if we're getting ahead of ourselves and starting to think about the infield not only of this year but of the future, that's one of the reasons why some people are arguing that when J.P. Crawford comes up, maybe you'll move Cesar Hernandez to a different team. Maybe you'll trade him and use Freddie Galvis at second. I've actually heard that argument despite Hernandez being a superior hitter by a wide margin.
Really?
Yeah, I have heard that just because Galvis is such an immaculate defender. Now, I'm not saying that's the way I would go, but it does speak to, he can play all these different positions and with aplomb, really. He's such a good defender.
But the thing is, though, if you move Freddie Galvis to second, you lose all of that great defensive ability at shortstop because it's such a demanding position. I feel like if you move Crawford up, why don't you? Is it possible you move him to second base for the beginning, or is that like you're really toying with something and you don't want to do that?
Yeah, I don't know if that's really what you want to do, especially with how his promotion to AAA has already been problematic.
Yeah.
But really, to me, Freddie's value going forward will be as a utility player with, immaculate defense. He can switch hits, so if you want to bring him off the bench at some point in the game, he can, even though he's not a great hitter. But really, he's like a defense-first player to me.
Yeah, and I'm with you. And considering how awesome Cesar Hernandez is playing right now, I don't think anybody's going to be unseating him at second base. If they do trade him, they probably get good value for him. So we'll see what happens, but hopefully he keeps up those bombs that he's hitting recently.
Yeah, I can't believe it.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. I love the guy now. Dan Walsh, Phillies Nation. We'll talk to you later on.
Yeah, sure.
Our guest this week on the Phillies Nation podcast is someone that you'll see every time you tune into a Phillies game on television. He is the field reporter for the Phillies. He's been the field reporter since 2012. Gregg Murphy, welcome to the podcast.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I got to ask you first off, because you've been the field reporter since 2012, is it fair to say that you're the reason the Phillies have not played well?
You're not the first person to make that correlation.
Really? Really?
Yeah, we were sitting in the dugout, yesterday as we're taping this interview. We were in New York in our final game against the Mets, and I sit down next to Mickey Morandini, and he says, "Hey, Murph, when did you start?" And I said, I always hesitate to answer that question. And I said, 2012 was my first year. And he just goes, "So you're the reason." All right, I got it. Yeah, so I do get that a lot. But I will say this, Tim. I hope I get the credit when we finally turn this thing around and start winning. I hope people are going to give me as much credit for that as well.
I mean, you've certainly gone to great lengths to, show that you're all in good fun with everything that you do. I remember, of course, last year was the fun jumping into the pool at Chase Field. Anything planned like that this year, or are you trying to think in your mind of things that you can do that are just wild and wacky and get you, some viral hits?
It's funny. Those kinds of things don't ever seem to be planned ahead of time. Not really anyway. The thing that happened in Arizona, I was on it was the beginning of I believe a 3-game series in Arizona, and I was on the pregame show on Comcast Sportsnet with Michael Barkan or maybe it was Marshall Harris and Ricky Metallico. They kind of said, "Hey, what would be cool if we sweep, you should jump in the pool." And I said, "I'll tell you what, if we sweep, I'll jump in the pool." And then we thought about it, and we won the first 2 games, and I was like, "Well, look, I got to jump in now."
Like they're not going to show it at the end of the of course.
Exactly. So that's kind of how that played out. And so to answer your question, I don't really have anything planned, but I always say to my producer Jeff Halleckman and to Tom McCarthy and the rest of the guys, I'm up for anything. I'll do just about anything if we think it's good television and we think it'll make the fans at home at least have a chuckle or two.
Is there any sort of dream scenario that you want to get put into at a visiting ballpark? Anything that you've, like Wrigley Field, rooftop stuff, or like anything that as you've been to different ballparks, thought, "Oh, I got to do that someday"?
Yeah, okay, so there's a couple that I've done, and the rooftop was one of them, and I've gotten a chance to do that a couple of times, which is great. I'd like to get inside that scoreboard one day, which I think can happen, and I think will happen at some point. I think that'd be neat. In San Francisco, I did the kayak out in McCovey Cove, and which was one of the coolest things I've ever done. But I have not slid down the slide in Milwaukee yet. And
do they let people do that? Do they let other people do that?
Not really, okay. But we're going to try anyway. And
jump in front of Bernie at some point and just do it.
Yeah, exactly right. And I'd like to do that, and I'd also like to do. I know a couple of folks in my line of work have done the sausage race, put on the costume and done the sausage race. So I would do that as well. So those are a couple of things that we've thought about, we've talked about that haven't happened yet. But I think if I get to do this long enough, they'll happen eventually.
I'd love to see you in the sausage race or something like that. Have you been behind the wall, the Green Monster in Boston?
I have,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
I guess that was 2 years ago. We were able to go inside the wall and talk about a cool experience. I actually videoed it on my phone, and we showed it on the air as I went in there and read all the names on the wall. And so, yeah, some pretty cool stuff so far. And there's just, who knows? There's always something else to be done. And so if there is, I'm going to try and do it.
It must be a dream for you. Now, you obviously grew up a Phillies fan. Where were you born, in Philly or outside of Philly?
I was born in Elmer Hospital, and it's section of Philadelphia. And my first 7 or 8 years of my life, I lived in the Northeast, and we moved over to South Jersey, and I grew up over in South Jersey, while I was in school and high school and everything. So, but, born a Phillies fan and, grew up just outside the city in South Jersey and grew up loving all 4 Philly teams. And I just literally pinch myself all the time knowing that I get a chance to do what I do now. So
I ask people all the time in these interviews, do you have a first memory of watching the Phillies, either live or on television?
Yeah, I have 2, actually. The first real memory I have of the Phillies and baseball was when I went to a game with my parents. It was probably 5 or 6 years old, maybe. And I remember walking out in Veterans Stadium behind home plate, the mid-levels, 400 level or whatever it was, tunnels from underneath where the concessions were, and seeing that field for the very first time and how green it was. That sticks in my mind to this day, how green the AstroTurf was in this big cement building, and I was just blown away by how cool that is.
I tried to make a joke with Dan Baker, who I talked to a couple of weeks ago, because he talked about coming out and seeing the field for the first time at Connie Mack Stadium.
Okay.
And I said, as a kid, my first memory, I don't think of walking out the tunnel and seeing Veterans Stadium grass because it was AstroTurf and it looked ridiculous. So to me that it's funny to me that you have that as you're a kid, you don't know either way, but that's pretty cool that it's that you didn't care what the surface was apparently.
You know what? I probably didn't even know at the time. I probably didn't even understand that it wasn't real grass, and I just remembered it being so big and so green, and I honestly, I feel like I could probably pick the section as to where we were sitting when we walked out and saw it for the first time. So that's my one memory. My second one is probably one that many people my age have, and that is I had just turned 9 years old, and it was 1980, and I was watching the final game of the World Series, and my father was a school teacher, and he was a 6th grade school teacher, and he was on the school camping trip with the 6th graders, and I had to go. Oh. And so we were in cabins, and I was with a bunch of kids I didn't know because I didn't go to that school.
Of course.
And they put us all in this one big room to watch it on the television. And I'm telling you, the way I remember it, first inning, 4 pitches in, the TV goes. So they sent us all back to our cabins, and we had to listen to the final game on the radio.
Okay.
And then when they won, we ran outside and we're banging pots and pans and anything else that we could get our hands on. So that's my other memory. I was hooked after that. I was a baseball nut, and so those are the 2 things I remember.
Were you ever upset at your dad for making you go on that trip with him in his class?
I'm still upset at him for that. It's funny. So the Phils have won 2 World Series, obviously, in their existence, and I have not been able to see either of the final pitches because, one, I was listening on the radio, and back in 2008, I was working at the time, and I was working for Comcast, and we were underneath the ballpark waiting to go out on the field when that final pitch was thrown, so we didn't see it either. We only heard it, and then went out on the field and celebrated out there. So
what's that feeling like, though? Because not a lot of people had that, can kind of have that memory. But, being underneath the stadium as the final pitch is thrown, because that place was shaking that night, obviously.
Yeah, it was surreal. Because, first of all, I'm such a fan. I'm such a Phillies fan that I was so excited. All my buddies that I grew up with, they're all going nuts. And, we were going to win a World Series. And that's pretty darn cool in Philadelphia. So from that perspective, I was just geeked up like everybody else. Being underneath was a little frustrating because you didn't know. We got brought down in the the top half of the inning, or I guess the bottom of the eighth, is when we got brought down. And so the top half of the ninth is going on, and we're hearing it over we're hearing it over the radio PA as they were calling the game, but we're not seeing it. And we're just all lined up. There's probably about 100 of us, media members, all lined up, in a hallway. And so, you're kind of like, man, I wish I was in the stands right now watching the end of this. But, but being out on the field about 3 minutes after the final pitch was pretty cool too. So, you can't have it both ways. So I'll take that.
Yeah. I mean, so being behind the scenes as you are, having to interview players and be out in the stands and kind of be working all the time, but still kind of, in a way, you're sort of like the connection to the fans because you do kind of the fun stuff on the field and you talk to fans and you're, moving about. How do you balance that connection when you're, doing two different things, but you kind of want to be in the mindset of being a fan, but obviously you have to work?
Yeah, I first of all, to me, what you just said is one of the biggest compliments that anyone could pay me, and that is that I'm kind of the connection to the fans. I take that very seriously because that's exactly the way I view my role. I am a fan, and I get what fans are going through in Philadelphia. At least I believe I do. And so I really do try to keep that in mind for the most part when I'm doing my job. Whether I'm doing something, I mean, there'll be times where I'm like, geez, should I be doing this now? We're down 5-2, and there are times where you say to yourself, if I were a fan at home, would I want to see this clown doing something right now? And we have those conversations. There are some times that we don't do things because we think, you know what, now's not the time. We'll have to save this for another day. Mm-hmm. But I think I'm lucky in that I can be a fan, and I would argue, and Tom McCarthy and I have had this discussion, and other play-by-play guys, and to me, when you work for a team as a major league play-by-play guy or field reporter, I think it's okay to be a fan. I think it's okay to be rooting for that team. You're not doing it for a national entity. You're not doing it and trying to be biased and down the middle, unbiased and down the middle. Mm-hmm. I think it's okay to root a little bit for the home team. I mean, after all, that's who your paycheck's coming from.
Sure.
When the team wins, our broadcast is better. When the team is winning, the city is more in tune to what we're doing. And so, it really does affect us on a day-to-day basis in terms of winning and losing. So I don't think I need to balance it. When I worked for Comcast Sportsnet as a sports anchor, I think there's a little bit more balance there. You have to separate yourself a little bit from it. But nowadays, in the role I'm doing, maybe I do it too much, but I just consider myself a fan that gets a chance to talk about the game every day. So that's the way I approach it most of the time.
No, definitely. I think that's the good way to approach it. I mean, you were an anchor at TSN. You went to broadcast you went to St. Joe's. Did you do broadcast at St. Joe's?
I didn't. St. Joe's didn't at the time have broadcasting as a major or a minor or any classes for that matter.
Okay.
I got very lucky. I went to St. Joe's. I graduated high school in '89 and went to St. Joe's. And my freshman year at St. Joe's, a good friend of mine was a big music nut, and he knocked on my dorm room one day in September, and he said, "Hey, I heard they're starting a radio station on campus. I'm going to go to the meeting because I want to be a DJ. So you want to go with me?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I'll go with you." So I went, and in the meeting, there's about 40 people in the meeting, and they were all music people. They were, all into music and everything, and I like music, but that's not my thing. And they stood up and said, "Well, we need somebody to do play-by-play for the basketball games." And no one raised their hand. Wow. And I was like, I'll do that. So that's how I got started. And after my freshman year of doing men's and women's games at St. Joe's, I just said to myself, you know what? I was going to be a lawyer. That was the plan. And I said, this is so much better than that. And I got an internship with Neil Hartman, and worked with him for a year and a half. And then I got 2 other internships, and and I never looked back. So that's kind of how I started. I was an English literature major with the pre-law emphasis, and that never really panned out. So
wow. So do you ever feel like you should drop, English lit? I'm trying to think, like a Shakespeare or something like that. Should you try to drop some weird references during the games that no one would understand, or maybe some law speak? I don't know.
You know what? Well, certainly not the law speak, because I never even got that far. Yeah. English, yeah. My one foray into that was, there's a beer vendor here who walks up and down the aisles at Citizens Bank Park, and he just screams "Stella" at the top of his lungs, and I think I'm the only one that thinks it's funny, because I just think it's tremendous. So.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's about it. But maybe I'll have to go back into my early lit days and pull out some references to see if they have any attachment to baseball whatsoever.
I mean, tap into that range that you got,
Yes, there you go.
So you got the internship with Neil Hartman, and then basically you were kind of on the fast track at that point. You went out to Allentown or something like that?
Yeah, well, my first television job. One day maybe I'll write it all down, but I've been so lucky in my career. I graduated St. Joe's and had contacts, but couldn't get a job. I worked in a delicatessen for a year out of college, and finally stumbled upon a job at a company called Scoreboard, which was a sports memorabilia company, much like Upper Deck. Mm-hmm. And I was working there just as a glorified gopher. And one night they decided to have this party for our CEO, and everyone had to bring a gift. Well, I didn't have a gift, so myself and another guy put on tape a fake television show where we sold autographed memorabilia from our CEO, and they actually played it at the party. And after that, the CEO came over to us and said, "You know what? I'm going to put you guys on TV." And he did. I started selling on QVC and Home Shopping Network and Sports Channel back in the day.
Oh, wow.
And turned that into my job at Reading and Allentown. So, you just never know.
Yeah,
you just never know.
That's an also, and that's usually how it works, is you do something that is just sort of, funny or stupid, or
right.
You're not even, you're just in your kind of creative place, and you're like, let me do something, and it turns out to be the thing that changes your life. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it really is. And again, it's just, I got lucky. I guess you put yourself in some situations to get lucky. I like to think I've done that, but if I look back over my career, over the 4 or 5 jobs that I've had, each one of them has a little bit of a wow. If I wasn't standing there, I might not have gotten that. And it's including the Phillies job. I mean, I kind of lucked into all this too. So
how did you luck into the Phillies job?
Well, I had been working for a TV station called CN8, which was the precursor to the Comcast network.
We remember CN8, yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. So I was a sports guy over at CN8.
Forget it.
What's that?
Remember, Your Call was the big show,
It's Your Call with Lynn Doyle. Yeah, there you go.
Doyle, right, Lynn.
That's right. So I worked right down the hall from Lynn, and I hosted a show the final 3 years of CN8 called Out of Bounds, which we were very proud of. It was a very good show. The only problem was no one was watching. And so eventually I had just signed a new contract with CN8, and about a month later the station went out of business. So here I was with a 3-year contract, and so Comcast said, well, we want you to go over to Comcast Sportsnet and be an anchor over there. So I did, which was very lucky, and became, a part of the on-air staff at Comcast Sportsnet, which I absolutely loved. And one day I had a day off, and my news director from Comcast Sportsnet, Michelle Murray, called me, and she said, "Greg, I need you to come in right away." And that's never a good phone conversation if you're in the TV business. So, and she could tell I was like,
on and off.
Okay.
Yeah.
And she said, "Look, I promise you, it's not bad, but I just need you to come in. I have to talk to you. You need to talk to someone about an opportunity," is what she said. And I said, "Okay," and I was convinced that they were going to ask me to go to Houston to start the new Comcast Sportsnet in Houston, and kind of be the Michael Barkan role down in Houston. That's what I thought was going to happen. Long story short, I walk into an office with a couple of our higher-ups, And I sat down, and my current boss, Sean Alexiak, said to me, "How'd you like to be part of the Phillies broadcast team?" And I looked at him and I said, "What do you mean?" And he explained, and I said, yeah, okay, yeah, I'd like to do that." And about 2 weeks later, I was in spring training. So that's how that all played out. Yeah,
that's really cool.
So yeah, like I said, a little bit of luck, a little bit about being in the right place at the right time, for sure. So
now, so you've been doing this for 6 years. Is your 6th year with
That's
the
right.
Phils? And through these 6 years, obviously there's been a lot of different players coming through. We've had a lot of change. A lot of things have happened with the team. Pick like a moment or two that really stand out as far as your experience so far and things that have really been the coolest things that you've done in the last 6 years.
Okay, from a baseball standpoint, I think first and foremost, Cole Hamels' no-hitter at Wrigley is number one. It was such a cool day in such a down season, and we knew that Cole was probably going to be traded shortly thereafter, which he was. And I remember, ironically, my two sons, I have 3 kids, but my 2 sons were in Chicago for that series. They had never been to Wrigley. Their first game in Wrigley, they're sitting in the bleachers, and Hamels throws that no-hitter. And it would, yeah, I mean, they don't even get how cool that is. They will someday. But, I just remember that day from a baseball standpoint saying to myself, this is as cool of a thing that I've been involved with directly. My interview with Cole after the game was great. Cole could be a great interview sometimes, but he could also be very difficult at other times. And he was just excellent in the interview, real thoughtful, and as you would expect. I mean, he was pretty emotionally pumped up. But so to that, from a baseball standpoint, that's been the best that I've been involved in. But I remember my first broadcast like it was yesterday. It was in Pittsburgh, and just saying to myself, wow, here I am, part of the Phillies broadcast team back in 2012. That was a pretty surreal moment. And then 3 years ago, Tom McCarthy needed a day off, and they turned to me and asked me if I wanted to do the play-by-play. And I'd never, ever in my life called a baseball game, and my first game was a Phillies game. So that was a pretty cool moment too. I'd like to think I've gotten better since then, but I don't know. But
I actually wanted to say, I'm glad you brought that up because I've heard. I mean, you've been taking over for Tom when he would go, and he's done some football broadcasts and things like that later in the season. And you did some spring training too this year. I heard you at spring training this year. You sound great. You really improved. From that first time. I think.
Yeah.
It sounds like you are definitely very settled in the job at this point.
Oh, I appreciate that, and I think that's probably the best way to describe it. It's like anything else in life, and I tried to explain this to my kids and anybody else that wants to listen.
People on Twitter.
I try calmly to explain to people on Twitter that it's not the easiest job in the world. But when you feel comfortable, when you start to feel comfortable in whatever you're doing, I think you just improve, leaps and bounds because of that. Mm-hmm. And I've gotten to the point now where I'm comfortable in doing the games. I certainly want to and intend to keep working at it and getting better and better. I have huge shoes to fill when I'm filling in for Tom McCarthy. So, I'd like to get to the level where there wasn't a big drop-off between the two of us. But I only get a couple chances a year to do it, so it's hard to practice. But it's a lot of fun. It is guys like McCarthy and obviously Harry and the guys that we all know that do it at a very high level. They make it look easy. I can tell you, it is not an easy job. It is. Yeah. It takes a lot of talent for those guys to be able to do it the way they do it.
I think people kind of don't realize how much goes into doing a broadcast, on television or on radio or whatever. And Tom does make it sound really easy when he's out there. What if is there anything that's the hardest thing about doing a play-by-play broadcast?
You know, if you've ever been to a ball game, people like to give others a hard time about, you know, missing a home run call or getting a deep fly ball wrong. And I'm sitting in the stands, and there's a fly ball at Citi Field yesterday, and 30,000 people get on their feet because they think it's a home run.
Well, yeah, no, we all do that.
Well, hey, if they all think it's a home run, why isn't it okay for the play-by-play guy to think it's a home run?
That's right, yeah.
But, you know, people don't want to think that way. They expect you to get it right all the time. So the more you do it, the better you get at it, because you just kind of start to see and hear it a little differently. But that was an adjustment. It was an adjustment for me, for sure.
Are you thinking to stay as the field reporter for a while here with the Phils, or do you have ambitions to be a P-by-P guy somewhere else, or maybe, you know, in Philly if Tom does something else or whatever? Or do you want to? What's your future looking like?
Well, here's what I would say, and if my boss Sean Alexiak is listening, I would say this: Sean, I love to stay for as long as you possibly would keep me. I love doing what I do, and I absolutely, when I decided to be a sportscaster, my dream job was at the time, I don't know how old you are, Tim, but Gary Papa was the main sports anchor at Channel 6, which was the main station in town, and
I'm old
enough. And I said, I want to be Gary Papa. I want to be the number. Okay, yeah, but I want to be the number one on the number one network, and when I finally ended up at Comcast Sportsnet, you know, the number one part of things kind of goes away. Now, when you get in the business, you're like, I'd love to work in my hometown and work for, you know, the number one sports station in town, which was Comcast Sportsnet and is Comcast Sportsnet. So when I got to Sportsnet, I said, I've made it. I got my dream job. I could do this for the rest of my life. And then the Phillies called, and I got this job, and so that kind of changed things. And I was like, wow, I didn't realize there was a next level up from even what I thought I had. So to answer your question, I would do the field reporting for as long as they'll have me. If a play-by-play job opened up in another city, I would think about it for sure. I'd be foolish not to. But I love working in Philly, and it'd have to be pretty special for me to take a job out of the city at this moment with the age of my kids and stuff. So, you know, I'd like to stay here, I guess.
Yeah.
Answer the question in any role, in any capacity, but I'd like to stay in Philadelphia. So,
well, certainly we like watching you on the broadcasts, and you're there every game. So it's a lot of fun to see you out there with the fans and with players and with fathers of players and mothers of players and all that great stuff. Gregg, we appreciate you on the broadcast. We appreciate you coming on the podcast. Thanks a lot, Gregg. It's been a pleasure.
It's my pleasure too, Tim. Thanks anytime, and all the best with the podcast.
Well, Cesar Hernandez is hitting the ball really hard right now. Odubel Herrera is having a pretty good season at the plate. One Philly that's not quite doing it, at least on the peripheral side, is Maikel Franco. His numbers right now, they don't look good. 182 average, 257 OBP, 348 slug. Does have a couple home runs. But Dan Walsh here, Phillies Nation, coming back at you. You are trying to tell me here that Maikel Franco is better than meets the eye right now. He's better than the eye test.
I'm telling you right now, he's doing everything under his control. He's doing well. What he's struggling with are the things that he has no control over at all. Things like luck. Things like, you know, hitting a ball right at a fielder, even though he hit it, he hit a laser right at a fielder. Things that he can't control at all. So what I want to do here's how I'll put it to you. All right.
Okay.
So I have stats from two players in front of me right now. I'm not going to tell you who they are. I'm just going to call them Player A, and I'm going to call them Player B, right?
All right, that's cool.
I'll give you a few of their stats. You'll tell me which one you think is a better hitter or which you'd rather have on your team. That sound good?
Yeah, I mean, how many of these you doing?
I got 2 or 3 that we can do.
Okay, yeah, let's roll them out, yeah.
Sure, and it's going to be the same 2 players for all of them. Is that good?
Yep, you got it.
All right, so first we have Player A. He hits 18% of his balls are line drives, 22% are soft contact, and 29 are hard contact. Player B, right, so that's 18, 22, and 29.
Okay.
Player B, you got 21% line drives. You got 18% soft contact, so it's more line drives, less soft contact, 33% hard contact. So that's more hard contact there. Tell me, which one would you rather have on your team?
Who's faster? No, I'm kidding. I would definitely pick player B with the hard contact and the line drives. I want a guy who hits liners.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't blame you. All right, so let's go on to the next one. Player A walks 8% of the time. He strikes out 16% of the time. Player B walks almost 10% of the time, so that's more walks. He strikes out about 14% of the time, so it's a little less strikeouts. Which one would you rather have?
If you're looking at walks and strikeouts, definitely player A. Or player B, the one with the 10%. Yeah, whoever the 10%.
Yeah, player B walks more, strikes out less.
I'm sensing a trend. Player B.
Right. All right. So one more. I've got one more for you. Player A swings at 33% of the pitches outside the zone, and he has 11% swinging strikes.
Okay.
Player B swings at fewer pitches outside of the zone, has a smaller percentage of swinging strikes. Who would you rather have?
What are the percentages?
33. So for player B, he swings at outside pitches 27% and 8% of his 8% swinging strike rate.
Okay. Definitely player B.
Player B. All right. So I'm going to tell you, player B is 2017 Maikel Franco.
Damn it.
Player A is Franco in 2015 when we all saw it as a breakout year. We said he was coming into the player that we needed him to be, that it was a great stepping stone for the future. And now we're talking about Franco like he's fallen apart since then. But with all these stats, he looks like a more refined hitter, right? He's walking more, he's striking out less, he's hitting the ball harder, he's hitting line drives more, he's chasing pitches less, right? So the only thing that he's gotten worse at is his batting average on balls in play. And now that is, he's hitting 167 on balls in play right now, which is,
not
something
sustainable. It's not
at all sustainable. His career BABIP is 269, and usually you expect some regression toward that mean. You expect to end up closer to there. So I have every reason to believe that all these things that he's doing better this year will turn into more success. His BABIP will normalize. He'll end up getting on base a ton. All these hits will start falling. He'll get on base as much as we need him to. All I'm saying is that he's doing a great job. You just don't see it yet.
So I'm doing the eye test on him because I'll be the eye test guy. And I still see a guy who swings pretty wildly at times, and the helmet starts flying off, or he's like grabbing it at the last second before it falls off his head. Is that something we want to see from a hitter? Don't we want to see a guy who's a little more measured at the plate, or is Franco always going to be that guy, and we just have to take the bad with? We hope the good will be here.
I think he's always going to be a little bit of a free swinger, but if you've noticed, he has had fewer instances of that happening this season. And in his game winner last night, which was Saturday night, you saw he stayed pretty compact. The helmet stayed right on his head. He didn't have to run to first base with no helmet on because he overswung and it fell off.
He almost didn't run to first base, by the way.
I don't blame him.
No, if he got tagged out, no, I guess the play would have been over. Anyways.
But yeah, I think he's always going to be a bit of a free swinger. But we're already seeing a little bit more refinement to that effect, right? He's not swinging out of himself as often, and I think that the danger will be if some of these balls don't start falling for hits. What does he do then? Does he go back to what he was like before out of desperation, or does he realize that this is just bad luck? It's fluky. It's part of the process, and things will come around for him eventually.
And that's going to be Matt Stairs. I think that's really where he comes into play, because I'm sure he's working with him day to day and saying, keep that swing where it is, keep hitting the ball hard, look at the pitch that you want, all that stuff. But at a certain point, if we're at like May 10th or May 20th and he's still hitting like 200 and he's not quite getting, the balls that he wants in play, that's the problem. If he does decide, I'm going to start hacking at the first pitch all the time and then, soft pop-up into the infield, we got a real problem with this guy, I think.
Yeah, we could, but all the stats that I'm looking at here suggest that we shouldn't worry too much about that happening. He should end up well over the Mendoza line at least. He should have some extra base hits come in. All the kind of stuff that we need from him. I fully expect to see in the future.
Well, certainly his swing on Saturday, the game winner to beat the Braves, was a really nice swing. Opposite field he went. It was very compact. It was very in the zone, and it made a really nice. Off the bat, it looked like it was definitely a double. It didn't look like a homer. Didn't look like a single. It looked like a line drive double. And Nick Markakis kind of can't believe he didn't go for it more, but it seemed like it was a double, and that was it, and the game was over. So it was a really nice piece of hitting, and hopefully that continues. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say I think that it will. I think that's the beginning of good things to come.
Well, hopefully it is. Dan Walsh, thank you for coming on the podcast. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, anytime.
My thanks to Dan Walsh again for coming on. He will have a piece this week at PhilliesNation.com about Maikel Franco and how he's actually hitting the ball better than you think, and hopefully that will start to show with actual hits and RBI and numbers going up, up, up. Hopefully it will. Also, thanks to Gregg Murphy, the field reporter of the Phillies, for coming on. Great conversation with him. He's a real good guy. And you could find him all over the ballpark, at CSN Philly, on the broadcasts, or wherever you may watch the Phillies. Thanks to bensound.com for the music for the podcast. Hey, if you want to contribute your music, if you want to record something or you have recorded something, I want it on the podcast. I'd love to get local musicians on the podcast. So please email me at tim@philliesnation.com or just tweet me at Timothy Malcolm. Or if you know somebody who's done some music and you think it would be great for the podcast, tweet me at Timothy Malcolm. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to talk about it and see if it's on point, and see if we can get it on the podcast. So please do that if you have some music. The Phillies Nation Podcast can be found on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, YouTube.com/Phillies Nation. Go to PhilliesNation.com for all of your Phillies news, information, rumors, opinion. And Facebook.com/Phillies Nation, Twitter @Phillies Nation, and Instagram @Phillies Nation _. We're always having fun on Twitter. We're always having fun on Instagram and Facebook. Check us out. Follow us. All that good stuff. Please, please, please subscribe to this podcast. Give it a good review. We need reviews. Please subscribe and give reviews. If anybody in my friend circle is listening to me, give a review. Even if it says Ian Riccaboni and Steve Carino on there. They were the old podcast. But please, review it because it is our podcast. Give us some stars. Do the good thing. We love you guys. Please, please, please. By the way, Nick Pivetta pitching extremely well. 19 innings this year. .95 ERA. 24 Ks and 2 walks. Pivetta Watch is on, guys. Pivetta Watch is on. I would say by the 8th start, I think we got to start campaigning if he's doing this well. Rhys Hoskins also having a great year. 321, 429 OBP, 604 slug. He's got 4 homers, 7 RBI, 32 total bases. He is the best hitter right now for Lehigh Valley. I think all-around hitter. Alfaro's hitting well too, but Hoskins, get it going, guy. Hopefully he can continue his torrid pace, and we'll see what happens. If Joseph continues to struggle, maybe there is a call-up sooner than later. But as we've said before, and we'll say it again, give Joseph time. Give the guys in the major some time, unless they get hurt. Right now, that's what you got to do, because we are in that mode still, even if the Phillies are 9-9. And maybe this week they will get over 500. They're playing the Marlins, then a tough series in L.A. West Coast baseball, baby. Only one real West Coast game, a Friday night game. But fun stuff. We're going to be all over it this week. Chase Utley playing the Phillies. Can't wait. It's going to be fun. Let's get some wins this week. For the Phillies Nation Podcast, I'm Tim Malcolm. See you next time.